Hey, what's up? So we're about a full month into the 2024 NBA season, and there are 6 NBA teams that still have yet to win their 5th game. We already have teams like the Boston Celtics, the Orlando Magic, the OKC Thunder, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Milwaukee Bucks, who have already won 11 games. But yeah, the 6 teams in this video that we are going to talk about have yet to reach 5. So yeah, what is going on, everybody? How is everybody doing today? We're going to be talking about the trash teams so far in the 2024 season, what went wrong, what they could fix, were they supposed to even be this bad, or are they just par for the course on their kind of like rebuilding season, and then they're really going to reload in the off season. So if you guys enjoy these videos, I would appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. If I mentioned either your favorite team or you want to give me any analysis on one of the teams that I mentioned now, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your guys' point of view on these squads. So the first team I want to talk about are the Memphis Grizzlies. Now the reason why I want to talk about them first is because they were not supposed to be this bad to start off the season, even with the Ja Morant suspension. So the Memphis Grizzlies are currently the 14th seed in the West. They are 3-12 this season. They started off the season 0-6 and 1-8. That is as brutal of a start as you could ask for, and they really haven't gotten any better. They're also just absolutely banged up with injuries at the moment. So we knew going into the season that we had no timetable on Brandon Clark's injury because he tore his Achilles in March. Right before the season started, it came out that Steven Adams was going to miss the whole regular season because he underwent surgery on his right knee. Last week, Marcus Smart was diagnosed with a left foot sprain. He was going to be out the next 3 to 5 weeks. Luke Kennard, Xavier Tillman, Jake LaRavia have all had injuries this year as well. And the Grizzlies are one of those teams that there's a couple players that I didn't really expect to see at all this season, like Jacob Gilliard. That was just kind of wild to see. They just signed Shaq Harrison to a 10-day contract. We're seeing Gigi Jackson play rotational minutes for them, and he was not NBA ready when he came out of South Carolina in this past draft. He needed time to develop in the G League. They're relying way too much on guys like Derrick Rose and Bismack Biyombo this season. And like I said, this team is 3-12, so they still have another 10 games without Ja Morant. They really could be 5-20 by the time Ja comes back. This team is that bad. Jaren Jackson Jr. has had a disappointing start to the season. He's averaging 19 points and 6 rebounds. But man, it's not really being efficient whatsoever. 41% from the field, 29% from 3. The block numbers are down. He still looks like a solid defender out there, but not the defensive player of the year caliber guy we saw last year. And it's definitely a tough kind of position for him as well. He's definitely has to do a little bit more than he did last year. I guess some bright spots out of the Memphis Grizzlies this year, like number 1 has to be Desmond Bane. I made a video on my second channel before the season started of like 10 dark horse MVP candidates, and he was one of them. And because I expected him to really ball out in the absence of Ja Morant, I expected him to really be the top guy over Triple J, because Bane is averaging 24 points, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds on pretty solid efficiency, shooting 45% from the field, 36 from 3, and 87 from the line. Another bright spot has been Santi Aldama, who is entering his 3rd season at the moment, and he's averaging 14.7 points. He's shooting 45% from the field, 36% from 3, giving them 6 rebounds and 2 assists a night as well. And Santi Aldama is 6'11", so they now have a 4-spacer they could put next to Triple J in that front court, which is great to have long term. But it just seems like guys like Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, and even at times David Roddy, just all former first-round picks, have not really taken any steps so far this year, and that has definitely hurt the Memphis Grizzlies. They never really made a big move leading up to, I guess, the Marcus Smart deal in the offseason, but that deal was supposed to really come into effect in the playoffs when you have him and Ja Morant out there at the same time. They ended up losing Tyus Jones, which definitely hurt this second unit. So the Grizzlies, they were not supposed to be this bad. I think at this point, their best course of action, I mean, they could still make the play-in tournament after Ja comes back. Like, you could maybe get 39 wins, and you could still end up as the 10th seed in the play-in. But it's easier said than done. They may be better off just getting a top pick in the draft, and they could leverage that to finally make a big move for a star player to add to this team, or they could just add another first-round pick. But honestly, they've made some good draft picks in the past, like Brandon Clark and Desmond Bane. But like I said, the Zaire Williams, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia picks have not looked great. So they're kind of hit and miss sometimes on the draft. So it'll be interesting to see how Zach Kleiman kind of responds to this team's tough start at the deadline. I spent a little bit more time on the Grizzlies than I wanted to. So let's talk about the worst team in the Western Conference, the team that's below them, and that are the San Antonio Spurs. So one of my bold takes that I said on Twitter before the year, I did predict that the San Antonio Spurs were going to finish with the worst record in the NBA. They currently have the 3rd worst record in the NBA just by a half a game. So hey, it's actually not a bad take so far. We all knew that Victor Wembanyama was going to be a generational prospect, but I did say that we had to pump the brakes on their hype. Like, people said he could be in the MVP conversation. They could be in the top 4 seed conversation in the West. Like, this roster is still not good. Popovich decided to play Jeremy Sochan at point guard, and while I kind of loved that idea to start off the year to see if we can get some point Sochan minutes, it really didn't work out for them. They definitely struggled. Trey Jones has done a much better job as that lead ball handler for them. And yeah, the San Antonio Spurs are currently 28th in the NBA in offensive rating. They're currently 25th in defensive rating. They are 30th, dead last in overall net rating, so you could say they are the worst team in the NBA, not looking at records. I think Wemby's done a fine job. Maybe you want him to be a little bit more efficient, but he's 19 years old. You can't ask him to do too much in year 1. Guys like Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson have had nice nice secondary seasons. Zach Collins has given them good minutes. Maybe Jamie Shohan hasn't played as bad as you may think he has, but they really haven't gotten too much production out of guys like Malachi Branham, and asking maybe too much out of guys like Jetty Osman and Doug McDermott because they're really just specialists in their roles. So if you're asking them to really kind of play clutch minutes for you at times, that's going to be a tough ask. But unlike the Memphis Grizzlies, I don't think the Spurs had high expectations this year. They have their first round pick. They want to develop Wemby. This team is still looking for their next kind of true franchise point guard to pair up with Wemby to really be a leader, floor general, and just kind of a pick and roll partner for Victor. So I think they're going to be looking for that all offseason long. Maybe they end up with a top pick in the draft and they could draft Isaiah Collier, who's a stud point guard out of USC, or DJ Wagner at Kentucky, or Stephon Castle out of UConn. It's a very good point guard class. I'm making a video on Sunday on my Sauce channel talking about my top 30 prospects in that class, so go check that out if you're interested in draft content. We'll also have my first mock draft over there as well if you're interested. So yeah, quick plug there. So I think the Spurs, they're going to be fine. They're going to be bad this year. They have their franchise player, which some of these other teams don't, that we'll talk about. So I think they're going to be fine. They just got to run the course this year. All you really care about is the development of Wemby, Vassell, and Keldon Johnson. And if you get anything like nice development out of Branham or Sohan, you take that. I would like to see some City Sissoko minutes this year as well. Why not towards the end of the season? And I think Popovich might have signed like an extension with them, so I think he's going to be around for another minute. All right, let's talk about the second worst team here in the Eastern Conference, and that's going to be the Washington Wizards, who have been just an absolute mess this season. So they traded Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis in the offseason, so they didn't really expect to be a top team in the East. I think maybe some people thought they could maybe sneak in as a 10 seed in the play-in tournament, but really nothing higher than the back leg of the play-in. They're 2-13 at the moment. They're currently 21st in the NBA in offensive rating, 28th in defensive rating, and 28th overall in just net rating at a negative 8.1. It's not great. Kyle Kuzma, their top guy, has actually been pretty solid this year. He hasn't been too inefficient. He's averaging just under 24 points per game. He's given them 6 rebounds and 4 assists, being pretty efficient as well. 47 from the field, 37 from 3, 80% from the line. If they do want to come up with the idea of possibly trading him at the deadline, they could get a nice package in return. And I definitely think that the Wizards should think about that. They're going to be in the top 5 or at least the top 7 in this upcoming draft, and they could really draft anybody. They don't really have like a franchise point guard because they could look to also move Tyus Jones as well, who's having a fine season for them, and they could definitely get a first round pick for him, in my opinion, maybe at the end of the first round. But yeah, they could look to add maybe some big men in this draft if they want to look at like Alexander Sarr, if they want to look at Donovan Clingan, Ade Mara. I think Nikola Topic could be a really fun point guard add for this team as well. But yeah, you're kind of stuck with Jordan Poole, who's been really bad. Nobody's going to want to trade for him. His contract's really bad, so you just kind of eat it and just hope he's your tank commander, I guess, and he could lose you games down the stretch and hopefully land you a nice pick in the lottery. But I think it's just kind of nice to see a little bit of development from Denny Avdija this year and Corey Kispert, as well as Bilal Coulibaly, who I thought was going to take a little bit more time to get acclimated to the NBA, has been fine this year for them, and he's still only 19 years old. Basically, anybody besides Denny, Kispert, and Coulibaly could be offloaded at the deadline. Even if you can get like a nice return for Daniel Gafford, I would think about it. So yeah, I don't really think the Wizards were supposed to be good. They were one of my bottom teams in the East going into the year. They're playing like it. I just think you just try to develop those 3 guys that I mentioned and just try to trade anybody for any draft capital or young talent you can get at the deadline. All right, next up, let's talk about the Detroit Pistons, a team that are worse than them in the East. So yeah, the Pistons are the worst team in the NBA at 2-14. So like I mentioned that the Grizzlies were not supposed to be this bad. They maybe even thought they could win a championship going into this year. For the Wizards and the Spurs, they knew they were going to be bad. I think the Pistons knew they were going to be bad, but not this bad. And after they've been just so bad, basically since the 21 season, this really does hurt to see. The Pistons are currently 26th in offensive rating. They're 24th in defensive rating, 24th overall in net rating in the NBA. Like I mentioned, they are 2-14. They have the worst winning percentage in the NBA at 12%. They have had some injuries this year. Monty Morris has been hurt, Bojan Bogdanovic, Joe Harris, Jalen Duren missed some time as well. But I think we just invested so much draft capital into these top guys like Kate Cunningham, who's a former #1 overall pick, Jaden Ivey, who's a former 5 overall pick, Jalen Duren, who looked great last year in his rookie season, Asor Thompson looks like he's great on both sides of the ball so far this year in kind of his own ways. Not as efficient, but he can do everything else. He was just the 5th overall pick in the 2023 draft. You had 3 first-round picks in 2020. Killian Hayes did not work out. Sadiq Bey, no longer there. Isaiah Stewart is a solid player, though. He worked out. You took flyers on former #2 overall picks in Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman. Neither of them have really worked out for you. Like, we're at the point where 2 former Knicks, Alec Burks and Kevin Knox, have been like top 6 guys on the team this season, which is just wild to say. And I got to give some love to Marcus Sasser because he's done a good job at kind of being a back-end first-round pick last year, but they just also made Monty Williams the highest paid coach in the league league. I think like the ceiling or kind of where you wanted to be for the Pistons this year is flirting with the play-in tournament. I think just seeing another year at the dead last bottom spot of the Eastern Conference has to hurt for this development. I know it's going to take some time. I know they've been missing arguably their top player in Bojan Bogdanovic, but it definitely just kind of pains me to see them this bad. I don't think they need to like hit the panic button and make any moves. I think you still keep basically Cade, Stewart, Ivy, Asor, Duran, Sasser. I think you look to move Bojan Bogdanovic at the deadline, and you hope that this is your last year at this spot in the East. All right, we're done with Eastern Conference teams now. We got two more Western Conference teams. Let's first talk about the Portland Trailblazers, who are currently 4-11 on the season. They're tied for the 13th spot in the West. We knew that they were going to be at least somewhat worse this year after they traded away Damian Lillard in the offseason. Finally, I'm still happy they did that. I didn't think they were going to be good this year, even though they had some nice talented players. Like they brought in Aiden, they brought in Robert Williams, they drafted Scoot Henderson 3rd overall. But yeah, they have been bad this season. They are currently 19th in defensive rating. They are dead last. They are the worst offensive rating team in the NBA, which puts them at a 29th out of 30th spot in overall net rating. Scoot Henderson has really not had a good start to his NBA career so far, just averaging 8 points. He's averaging 5 assists, but he's shooting 32% from the field and 8% from 3, which is just not good to see whatsoever. Robert Williams is going to be out for the whole season. DeAndre Aiden, who I thought maybe would have been pretty solid for the Portland Trailblazers, has not been good for them whatsoever, so they're probably going to still look for their long-term big because Aiden hasn't played good, and is Robert Williams ever going to stay healthy? I think Jeremy Grant has been fine for them this season. He's been pretty efficient. He's averaging a decent amount of points. His defense is still there. His contract is really big, though, so I don't think you're going to be able to trade him at the deadline. The only thing I could even possibly think is, like, but I don't even know why would, like, Brooklyn want to, like, offload Ben Simmons' contract, because it'll match, like, to a decent extent, and you bring in Jeremy Grant, but is that, like, a guy you want to spend $30-something million on for the next 5 years? No. And are you going to want to also give up draft capital in that deal? No. So I don't think Jeremy Grant's going anywhere. I couldn't even think about another team that would want to trade for him. Malcolm Brogdon kind of was inconsistent to start the year, but he's been good. He's somebody you could definitely get a first-round pick for still at the deadline, so I would still do that, still trade him. They've had a plethora of injuries this year for sure. Like I already mentioned, Robert Williams got hurt, Ish Wainwright's been hurt, Anthony Simons has been a big one. He's been out. Aiden's kind of dealing with a back injury right now. Shaedon Sharpe looked really good to start the year. He's kind of hitting a little bit of a slump right now, which has dropped his efficiency overall. So I think you pretty much just try to see as much as you can out of Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, and Anthony Simons this year. It's going to be tough, but I don't think you're going to be able to move DeAndre Aiden or Grant at the deadline. So you probably just still look to move Malcolm Brogdon, see if anybody wants like a Matisse Thybulle or Tumani Kamara, and let's see some more Chris Murray minutes. Please, Chauncey Billups. Okay, and the last team I want to talk about is the Utah Jazz, who are also 4-11, tied with the Trailblazers for the 13th spot in the West. I don't think anybody predicted them to make the playoffs this year because the West is very talented, and they were just kind of like one of the odd teams out, but I didn't think they were going to be this bad to start off the year. They're pretty much average 14th out of 30th in the NBA in offensive rating, but they are dead last in defensive rating. Yeah, they are the worst defensive team in the NBA this year, which puts them 26th in the NBA in overall net rating. The Jazz haven't dealt with too many injuries this year outside of Walker Kessler, who got off to a very weird start. Didn't look like the same Walker Kessler we saw kind of break out in his rookie season last year that nobody really expected him to, and he was on Team USA in the FIBA World Cup, so it was a weird start for him. He's currently out with an elbow injury right now, and I think Lauri Markkanen is still showing what he did last year to win Most Improved. Would you like to see maybe translate a little bit more to wins? Yes, but this roster still isn't great around him. Jordan Clarkson was so bad to start off the year, but he's been coming along as of late. John Collins has been a fine offensive player, but you're really sacrificing a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, and you haven't really seen much out of either Colin Sexton, Taylor Horton-Tucker, or even Keontae George this season. But obviously for George, you're going to be a little bit more patient than the other two just because he's a rookie, and I think he had a little bit too high of expectations coming off his strong summer league in preseason. I would like to see more Ochai Agbaji minutes, Will Hardy. Like, what are we doing? And obviously we haven't seen much of Taylor Hendricks, who was their top 10 pick, or Bryce Sensabaugh, who went later in the first round out of Ohio State. So I think for the Jazz, like 4-11 is definitely disappointing. You'd probably want to be around 500 this year, and they could definitely still finish. They have a talented roster. I do wonder if they're going to make some moves at the deadline. Like, would they look to see if somebody wants like a Jordan Clarkson or Kelly Olynyk? I've seen some ideas of Lauri Markkanen possibly being on the block because he's going to be due for an extension soon. And are the Jazz want to give him like the ultimate max? And like, do they think like their kind of ceiling is capped with him as like their top max guy? Maybe, but I don't think they should look to move him since he is still just 26 years old. I didn't maybe love the John Collins trade when it happened, but I don't think he's really like a huge reason why they are 4-11. So Jazz fans, you guys can kind of let me know in the comments below what you feel about your team so far this year. And that is going to be it for me. I hope you guys did enjoy. Let me know what you guys think about the 6 teams that I mentioned in the comments. Like I said, I think all of them are pretty much in line where you could think where they would be in at least like seeding wise. Besides the Memphis Grizzlies, you'd think they'd be a little bit better even without Ja Morant. So hope you guys did enjoy this style video. Drop a like if you did. I love you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.